on ABC Radio Brisbane. To federal politics now. We do often talk about the politics of division, don't we? It's always in our faces. One side says this, the other side says that. But it is nice when there's a bit of bipartisanship to celebrate. And I guess that announcement today of a plan to jointly fund the infrastructure for the Olympics if Queensland's successful, that's a bit of good news, isn't it? Luke Howarth's here, federal LNP member for Petrie, and happy to talk about politics. Is there ever any doubt, I suppose, about joint funding for the Olympics, Luke? Was that always the plan?
I don't think so, although in 2000 it wasn't jointly funded. I think the New South Wales government put most of the funding up, but since the Commonwealth Games here, which obviously is in the Olympics, it was a joint 50-50 there. So I think the Morrison government was happy to put in 50%. It's important for 2032 for our bid, and I think this announcement will help with it.
What are you hoping that Queensland will get out of it for 2032?
Well, I think more jobs, more tourism. It's a great opportunity to put Brisbane on the map. I mean, I was a kid when the 1982 Commonwealth Games were held in Brisbane, and then recently the Gold Coast as well. But we haven't had an Olympics in my lifetime, so I think it's just a great opportunity to put Brisbane on the world map. I mean, let's face it, it's a great city. We love to live here, and that's the big plus that will come from winning those Olympics in 2032.
There's so many competing needs for money now. Just looking around us at the amount of funding that's had to go into propping up the economy because of COVID. We've obviously been focused on aged care as well, and the huge systemic problems there that need a lot of attention. Basically everywhere you look, domestic violence in the headlines and needing a great investment. So, is it difficult to throw your full support behind an Olympic bid when there's lots of competing needs for the money?
Well, you're right, absolutely. So many areas in our lives always need funding, and at the federal level, you talk tens of billions of dollars worth of funding every year. I think in Sydney 2000, it was about a $6 billion investment. In 2032, I mean, the Olympics have changed. We don't want cities like Rio have been stuck with huge bills in the past. So I think 2032, this time, we want to make sure at the federal level and at the state level that these projects have done a thorough cost-benefit analysis, that it's been worked through from an independent committee, and that we only spend money where we need to. We don't want to spend additional billions of dollars if we don't have to. So, I mean, that's what I'd say about it, just that we need to make sure that this bid, we win it. We're a great city, we're a great country, and that we don't over-invest if we don't have to.
Is there anything you can say to explain to us? Because as a layperson, kind of on the outside, you see where there's issues of great need. I mentioned too, aged care and domestic violence, just as things that have been in the news lately. And there's a limit to what the funding can be to try to solve those types of problems. And you could pick anything. You could pick Indigenous literacy. You could pick, any number of health issues. But then when COVID happened, all of a sudden there was an amazing capacity to free up money and to be able to spend immediately, and we're talking huge numbers there. So is there anything you can say to explain to a layperson why sometimes there's not enough money and why sometimes there is?
Well, I think funding always goes up. I mean, since I've been in Parliament, if you pick any area, whether it's education, health, defence, environment, every year the funding goes up. So that's the issue. I mean, I guess it's just the need that also goes up. So if you take an area like aged care, billions and billions are spent each year, new money there, but we're also all living longer and our population's growing. So therefore, is the funding going as far if you've got as many people? I mean, obviously with COVID-19, it was something that we've never seen in our lifetimes. No one living has ever seen anything like this, where businesses are just completely shut down and jobs are completely closed through no fault of their own, but because of a global pandemic. So we were, I think, last year looking to run a surplus budget, and it turned out to be over $100 billion in deficit because of the JobKeeper and the JobSeeker and all the stimulus packages that we did there to try and keep people safe, but also in employment and able to pay their bills.
And just to pick out one of the features of that spending, that was the JobKeeper. And I was wondering, given your particular responsibilities for youth employment. Since that's been removed, what's been the impact for young people because of that?
We'll have a better idea, I think, in next month, like in the April job figures. But in the March job figures, obviously, the unemployment rate nationally fell just slightly from 5.8% to 5.6%, and youth unemployment also came down a little bit. So,
and what's that? What's youth unemployment at the moment?
It's about double that. So it's just sitting around 11 or 12. But there's some regions where it's even higher. If you go up to places like Wide Bay, it's in 20%. So basically, we need to make sure that those figures keep coming down, but I think it's too early to tell yet. I did read some figures just recently that those people on JobSeeker nationally have fallen. So that was just yesterday that I saw that. So there hasn't seemed to be a whole lot of people that are being pushed onto JobSeeker because of JobKeeper ending, which is good news. It does show that the economy is rebounding and people are getting a bit more confidence back.
On ABC Radio Brisbane, you're hearing from the member for Petrie, Luke Howarth, who's talking federal politics with us today. And I'm just wondering, as I said, you've got an assistant ministerial responsibility for youth employment. Do you have a target for youth unemployment about what's an acceptable figure for you?
Well, in my own electorate, when I was first elected in 2013, the figure was about 16%, and now it's more in line with the national average, which is good. It's a bit higher in northern Moreton Bay, up around Caboolture and Morayfield and places like that. But at the end of the day, we want to see it be lowered everywhere. And when I was given this portfolio role by the Prime Minister in December, he actually said to me, "Luke, I want you to take on youth and employment services." And he goes, "What I really want you to focus on is youth and helping them back into employment." So there's not a figure on it, but it needs to be done right across.
You don't have a target? Like, isn't it good to have a target with these things?
Well, the target's just to keep lowering it. That's right. The target, right? So just keep lowering it, because it is different everywhere. As I say, if you go up to Wide Bay, I mean, up in the member for Hinkler's area, Keith Pitt, he's the Resources Minister, his is in the 20% up there. So it's really, really high, right? The regional areas can be very, very high. And so we have been rolling out job fairs around the country to try and help with that.
On ABC Radio Brisbane, you're hearing from Luke Howarth, the federal member for Petrie. Now, the Prime Minister has been speaking this afternoon. He has announced that he's suspended flights from India. Of course, this is a difficult issue, managing the risk here in Australia without abandoning Australians in India who want to come home, and the huge numbers of positive COVID cases that they're seeing day on day on day. Does this make this sort of problem that we're seeing in India and the increased level of risk in Australia too, with people coming back, does that make the idea of a purpose-built quarantine facility more attractive to you?
No, because look, the current quarantine facilities are doing really well. Like, obviously Australia's the best in the world when it comes to hotel quarantine. And at the National Cabinet in March last year, when the Premiers and the Prime Minister worked out what would happen with quarantine, it's been working very, very well since then. I've actually got some figures in front of me as well. So most of, since October, New South Wales has done 57,000 people in hotel quarantine, and there's basically been 5 incursions, so where COVID has spread from the hotel. If you look at Western Australia, they've done 21,870 since October, and they've had 2 incursions. So it's basically not 1 in 100, or 1%, not 1 in 1,000, but it's about 1 in every 10,000 where there is an incursion. So it does work quite well, comparing that to India, where you're seeing over 300,000 people a day contracting COVID. We're doing so well in Australia.
But, so you don't see a need, obviously Northern Territory has that Howard Springs facility where people are kind of outdoors and in little dongers. That's not a better option for us in Queensland too?
Well, you just wouldn't get the volume of people through. So since October, you've had nearly 30,000 people in Queensland that have come through hotel quarantine. And obviously hotel quarantine is, close to hospitals, it's close to those health facilities that you need, and it's isolated in the sense that they have en-suites and everything, whereas a lot of those facilities you're talking about don't have that. It's more of a shared facility.
On the phones, 1300 222 612 is the number, and Steve is in Strathpine. G'day, Steve.
Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're all well.
Yes, indeed. Now, you don't want the Olympics. How come?
No, I think the money would be better spent on look, even in today's paper, they keep hearing in Queensland the hospitals are overstaffed, they're underfunded. You know, we've got ambulances that are lined up in queues. They can't get people in the hospitals. Yeah, and all the politicians say is, oh, it'll put Brisbane and Queensland and Australia on the map. Well, the world already knows where we are. We don't need to be put on the map. The money needs to be spent on better things, and including defence. It's just a popular political gathering exercise by whichever party is in power. And I've got to admit, I just can't see the waste and the time of this money.
Thank you so much for your view, Steve. Appreciate that. Steve in Strathpine there, and there will be plenty who agree that it's not a very good use of money. But you spoke earlier, Luke, about your views on that it's about being able to leverage other things, I suppose, to the southeast.
Yeah, we do need to make sure that any infrastructure spend on the Olympics is good value for money. And I won't go into individual projects, but going forward with a joint Olympic committee that looks at this, it's got to be good value for money, and using existing assets is important. So, I mean, out in my own area as well, there's little boutique stadiums like at Dolphin Stadium at Redcliffe that seats 10,000 people. So little stadiums that are already existing like that would be perfect that we could use for additional sports as well. So hopefully it'll have a bit bigger footprint than just Brisbane City Council, but also maybe include Moreton Bay Council and possibly the Gold Coast as well, where there's already stadiums built there recently for the Commonwealth Games.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
On ABC Radio Brisbane, Luke Howarth has been here with you. He's the federal member for Petrie.
What matters to you? Justice. Family.